Scar. We all know him. The fiendishly foul, ferocious feline based on one of William Shakespeare's greatest villains. A man so vile and wicked that he kills his own brother to become king. I'm talking, of course, about... No, not Claudius. Scar is not based on Claudius from Hamlet. Didn't you watch last video? Welcome to Teacup For One. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees. Welcome to part 2 of William Shakespeare's The Lion King. I like to say The Lion King is one of my favorite Disney movies because it's Disney, it's Shakespeare, and it's cats. And today we are going to look at the similarities between Scar and William Shakespeare's Richard III. If you missed my last video, well, first off, what are you doing? Go back and watch it. But secondly, just to recap, I personally believe that The Lion King is based on Shakespeare's own version of the MCU. His history plays known as the Henriad. The Henriad is a collection of 8 plays that's broken into 2 phases, kind of like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Phase 1 is all about the order of events that gets King Henry V onto the throne, and that phase is made up of Richard II, Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, and then finally Henry V. The second phase is concerning the War of the Roses, and that's made up of Henry VI Part 1, Henry VI Part 2, Henry VI Part 3, and then finally Henry VI Part 4. Sorry, no, you're right. There is no Henry VI Part 4. The final play in the second phase is Richard III. But honestly, it might as well just be called Scar, because Richard III is just the Lion King from Scar's perspective, written 400 years earlier. For anyone who hasn't suffered through a high school English class, Richard III is based on the real-life monarch who ruled England from 1483 through to 1485 and made some morally questionable choices to get himself onto the throne. 108 years later, he would inspire William Shakespeare to create one of theater's greatest villains of all time, who in turn would inspire one of the greatest Disney villains of all time 400 years later. Let's count down the top 3 reasons that Scar is Richard III. First, their appearance.
Well, forgive me for not leaping for joy. Bad back, you know.
Scar and Richard III are both characters who are literally defined by their physicality. Scar is defined by his scar, and multiple characters throughout Richard III refer to Richard as the bunched back toad.
That foul bunched back toad!
And just for context, we now know that the actual historical figure had a form of scoliosis which resulted in a curvature in his spine, but Shakespeare took some extreme creative liberties when he was creating his version of Richard III. Many of the traits that Shakespeare gave to Richard III were eventually mirrored in the design for Scar. Richard even says of his physicality. And yes, I'm about to perform Shakespeare in my best Scar voice. Why, love forswore me in my mother's womb, and, for I should not deal in her soft laws, she did corrupt frail nature with some bribe, to shrink mine arm up like a withered shrub, to make an envious mountain on my back where sits deformity, to mock my body. Admittedly, Scar is a very able-bodied lion, but his animation and his design still pay tribute and draw inspiration to those 2 defining traits of Richard III, his back and his arm. When we first meet Scar, he's pretty malnourished, and anytime he's walking, his shoulder blades stick out. They look like mountains, the mountain on my back. And there are many moments, usually when he's at the peak of his scheming, that he is literally hunched over, and then his mane over top of his face creates a very Richard III-like image. And whenever he's sauntering around, he'll very often just stop and coil in his right paw, sort of as a tribute to Richard's withered arm. Laurence Olivier even does something similar in his film of Richard III. His Richard is also relatively able-bodied, but his costume design creates a silhouette that's just an exaggerated form of the character that Shakespeare describes. In both cases, the physical limitations of Richard as well as Scar fuel their personal bitterness and their relationships. Which brings me to the second reason Scar is Richard III, their relationships with their brothers.
Well, as far as brains go, I got the lion's share, but when it comes to brute strength, I'm afraid I'm at the shallow end of the gene pool.
Even though Richard has an entire play dedicated just to him, we first meet the character during the Henry VI trilogy, which gives us some backstory into Richard, pun intended. Richard is first introduced alongside his two older brothers, Edward and George. They enter into the action of the play because their father, the Duke of York, believes that he is the rightful king of England. So, the three of them set a plan into motion to get rid of Henry VI off of the throne, which they do because Richard ultimately kills him, and then Edward, the oldest brother, takes the reins as King of England. But once they get Henry off the throne and Edward onto the throne, where does that leave poor Richard? In the same boat as Scar. Bitter at the world because of the hand he's been dealt, with nothing left to wish for except the crown. And since this world affords no joy to me, I'll make my heaven to dream upon the crown. And whilst I live, to account this world but hell, until my misshaped trunk that bears this head be round impaled with a glorious crown. Richard is the one who killed Henry VI, and yet his older brother gets to take the throne. I mean, how is that fair? It's not. Scar and Richard both take a back seat to their physically stronger older brothers who ultimately end up on the throne, but the tragic mistake that these kings make is underestimating their little brothers. No, please, talk to my brother Richard, he'll save me. Oh, honey, you have no idea. He's the one who put the hit out on you. And something pretty much identical happens in The Lion King. Brother, help me. Long live the king. Proof that cats don't always land on their feet. But their kingly brothers are not the only thing standing in the way between Richard and Scar getting to be king, which brings me to the third and final reason that Scar and Richard III are one and the same. They both get the award for World's Worst Uncle.
Hey, Uncle Scar, will I like the surprise?
Simba, it's to die for.
Richard III has a famously terrible relationship with his nephews, and it is ripped straight from the history books. Honestly, go Wikipedia The Princes in the Tower. And his disdain for his nephews starts before they're even born. Midway through Henry VI Part 3, Richard finds out that his older brother Edward is engaged, and his first thought expressed to the audience is that he hopes Edward can't have children. I, Edward, will use women honorably. Would he were wasted, marrow, bones, and all, that from his loins no hopeful branch may spring to cross me from the golden time I look for. But of course, Edward does have kids, and the final moment of Henry VI Part 3 is when Edward is on the throne as king, and then Richard comes in and meets his brand new baby nephew. He's all smiles on the outside, but inside, he recognizes this kid as just another obstacle between him and the throne. That scene is such a strong indicator of the big similarity between Richard and Scar. They both have to put on the face of the fun, loving, caring uncle so that they can gain their brother's trust and their nephew's trust before they ultimately try to get them killed. Richard convinces his nephews to spend a night in the Tower of London. It's like, oh, it's a sleepover, it'll be fun. He doesn't tell them about the murderers, but there are murderers. Just like how Scar convinces Simba to wait down in the gorge before he sends his own slew of murderers, which are the wildebeest, ultimately beckoned on by the hyenas. But the major difference between Richard III and Scar is that Richard successfully kills his nephews, but Simba escapes. This is the point in the movie when The Lion King starts to move away from the Richard III plot, and once Simba survives and we move into the second half of the movie, that's when the plot starts to borrow from another Shakespearean classic, all about one of England's greatest rulers, mirrored in Simba, none other than the king who's going to be featured in the third part of this series. Alright folks, there you have it. My reasoning for why Scar is actually Richard III. What did you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Please let me know in the comment section down below. And after you do that, don't forget to click on through to see part 3 to see why Simba is actually Prince Hal, aka Henry V. And if you liked this video and you'd like to see me talk even more about Disney films, or even watch me have some adventures in the Walt Disney World theme parks, please subscribe to the channel. It's super easy. All you need to do is click on my face and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. I'll see you in part 3. Go on, Simba's waiting for you.